Hey everyone, welcome to Winning the Challenger Sale, where we help you win the sales moments that matter every day. As we near the conclusion of 2023, we're focused on ending the year with a strong close. Today, we have one of the most interesting people in B2B sales joining us, Ernest Owusu. Moving to B2B sales from the NFL is a very unconventional path. Not only has Ernest made the transition, he's recognized as one of the top market strategy voices and provides guidance to top sales leaders on how to build successful sales development programs. Currently, Ernest serves as a director of sales development at 6 Sense. Ernest, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
So interesting, your background. I'm a huge sports person, so I was so excited to read about your background. And obviously, you had a great transition from the NFL to B2B sales. I love that you played for the Vikings. I've been watching the quarterback series on Netflix. So watching about Cousins. So tell me about your transition.
Yeah, sure. It's definitely been quite the journey. So I had the opportunity to play professionally, which is an amazing lifelong dream achieved. And I think a lot of people don't realize, but the NFL stands for not for long. So I wasn't there for long. But when I was in there, it was obviously a great experience. And when I finished, I was trying to figure out, I got this pinnacle, this high achievement. What can I do that takes all the skills, all of the experiences and translate into something else, right? And all signs and roads, they started to lead towards sales. So I just took a leap of faith and here I am.
Yeah. So what are some of those skills? Like, what are some of the things that, as I think about, I know I was like a team sports person. I always think about like being a CEO and, working with teams my whole life, even as a kid. But like, what are some of the skills that, I'm just curious from a NFL perspective?
Yeah, sure. So definitely at that level, I was extremely competitive. Now, I think in the B2B tech sales landscape, you got to tone it down a little bit. You can't be as aggressive as I was.
You can't just crash into your opponents.
Exactly. So that competitive nature, my work ethic, I prided myself on no one was going to outwork me in any environment, and I still hold that to this day. Being very coachable, taking feedback and learning and growing from every single experience. Those are the things that got me to that level. And if you think about a sales career, I mean, that's exactly what it takes to be successful. So that's why I made the transition.
Yeah, no, that totally makes sense. I love that. I'm a big fan of any success story around the NFL or any sports in general. So fantastic. So, as you heard me mention in the intro, our focus on this episode is ending the year with a strong close. I know for a lot of our sellers, it's Q4, right? So, what's some broad advice of like some successful year-end campaigns or initiatives that, you think about when you think about, obviously you're big on team performance, competitiveness. What are some of the things that have helped make your team successful?
Yeah, it's a great question. And this definitely goes to the pipeline generation sales development front.
Yeah.
So for a lot of teams, going into Q4 or starting Q4 is probably one of the most challenging times of the year. If you don't go into Q4 with a plan, then you are more than likely going to be in a situation where you're going to fail or not achieve the results you're looking for. So now I think different companies, different teams have varying ways of how they do this, but having a very concrete data-driven plan for the quarter, as well as making sure operationally everything is set up for you to succeed within that. That's what I've always seen that, works really well for the team. So it could either be from, an SDR standpoint, a fast start campaign, which means that, if I have all this that I want to do within the course of a quarter, trying to focus as much of that as I can up front, as opposed to spreading out through the course of the quarter. That's always something that works really well. Good planning, as I mentioned earlier, where you're very keen on like the specific accounts, the research you want to do, making sure everything is dialed up before you start the quarter. Typically that creates an environment where you're a lot more successful as opposed to kind of just going through the fly and letting things run as they do.
Yeah, no, I love that. It's actually a really good point because I know for us, like Q3 is a little bit slower for us given the summer months. And so, you should use that time, to your point, to like plan for Q4. Don't start planning for Q4, the day one of Q4. So
Exactly.
No, that's a really interesting concept. I feel like that's something people could really take away. So what is like, you're obviously in a leadership role. So like, what does your year end at 6 Sense look like? Like, what are some of the things you uniquely tell your team, when you're talking about Q4?
Yeah, definitely. So, going on that idea of planning, right? So During Q4 with a sales development team, at times things can be a lot more challenging. So you have to make sure your team, from a morale standpoint, is actually ready to go and locked in. And the big mantra we have is basically follow your process, right? We create this plan together. It's data driven. We know exactly what you need to hit your number. Here's what you have to do, and things may not fall the way you want them to, but follow the process, trust the process, and ensure that's kind of what you're relying on. Because again, it is a bit challenging, but from a plan standpoint, just making sure the team mentally is there. Obviously tactically making sure they have a plan and they actually execute across it. And then, we trust our process. We trust how we design things. And we know that if we are consistent with how we execute it, then we'll hit the numbers we're looking for.
No, I love that. So when you talk about trusting the process, which is so hard, right, for salespeople, especially when they're looking at the calendar and they're like, oh my God, I have 30 days left in the quarter and the year, So what are some things about your process that make it unique, or that, when you say to people like, hey, trust the process, what are you really like referring to?
Yeah, definitely. So we are definitely heavy users of our own product, 6 Sense. So
right.
being able to see when accounts are in market, being able to know who to go after based upon that. We know that traditionally X amount of accounts will come in market. We know that traditionally X amount of inbounds might come through. And based upon that, we know the conversion rates we expect per BDR. So knowing that, it might be the first week of the quarter and you haven't produced any meetings, but here's what the math typically tells us. Continue with the process knowing that you're going to do X amount of research to accounts, go after X amount of contacts, and let the numbers flow through to drive the conversions you're looking for. But, again, being very heavily reliant on AI using 6 Sense to see when accounts are in market, knowing who to go after, trusting that process creates an environment where it's a lot easier for us to hit our number because we know who to go after as opposed to blindly going after an account that may not be in market for our solution.
Right. So for those of the people listening, I obviously am a big fan of 6 Sense, but for those of us that don't know, tell me a little bit about what 6 Sense does.
Yeah, good question. So basically with 6 Sense, we help companies identify when other companies are in market for their solution. So basically the way we look at it is if there's a company that looks like your customers and is acting like a customer before they open an opportunity, we want to put our best foot forward from a sales and marketing standpoint to, prioritize that account and make sure we're trying to bring them to the fold and generate an opportunity with them. And, personally, from my standpoint, when I was a BDR, we didn't have this kind of technology in the past. There was a lot of shooting in the dark. But it makes it a lot easier and a lot more efficient for your team to produce pipeline because we're going after accounts that are statistically more significant or statistically more likely to turn into an opportunity as opposed to an account that maybe isn't ready to buy from you.
No, that's so valuable, right? We all don't, time is money, right? And listening to accounts or, at Challenger, we talk about mobilizers, talkers, and blockers, right? And obviously talkers are the worst because, they're never going to buy, but they just sit there and waste your time. So I think understanding exactly where they are in the process is incredibly helpful, especially when we think about how 2023 has been this kind of year of uncertainty from a sales perspective. So what are some things that you've done, just given the uncertainty in the economy right now, obviously using your tool, but what are some other things that you've done for your plan?
Yeah, definitely. So I definitely say we've leaned very heavily on the use of AI. AI comes in many different functions, from how the team is doing research, from how they're producing output, from how they're looking at the territory and attacking it. We're in this new age right now where there's obviously a lot of data out there. And so trying to figure out what's actually useful versus not, AI allows you to do that. So we are definitely heavily relying on that within our process and strategy to make sure that we're able to hit our numbers. But yeah, I'd say probably more than that than anything. It's the use of AI, obviously our own product, which makes it a lot easier for us to focus on the right accounts. And it's been very successful for us.
Yeah, for sure. So we were just talking about the unique market conditions. I guess that's the nicest way to put it, right? But I saw a few months back, you had a LinkedIn post. I thought that was really interesting. You were talking about how everyone has this one tactic that's really helped them, get a bunch of meetings. And for you, it was like a handwritten note, which I love, by the way. I'm a huge fan of handwritten notes, especially in this day and age where everything is in email or digital. So what are some tactics that that, people have used or you've talked to people about?
Yeah, definitely. So I'd say for those of you who are successful with prospecting through LinkedIn, we've heavily experimented using their voice recorders and video specifically within LinkedIn, right? I also imagine that if you have prospects that are not typically in this tech SaaS world who aren't used to seeing that kind of approach, our team has a lot of success with that. We've actually incorporated a very heavy calling culture, right? I think right now there's a lot of reliance on BDRs of just emailing because it's easier. But I still firmly believe people do want to talk to you on the phone, and we've significantly increased the volume of calls, and we've had better results from that. So I say tactically, if you're using LinkedIn, your team should definitely rely on the voice recorder as well as video recording software. It works really well. And then, don't be afraid of the phone. People are still answering the phone. And I know there's a perception of spam calls and, should my team be calling? It's not effective. It still works very well. I think of all the channels, that's the one that's tried and true, has not lost its flavor. And we've actually doubled down on it this year. And as a result, we're continuing to produce our numbers we want to.
Yeah, no, I could totally see that. I mean, I know that's something we talk about a lot at Challenger, right, how much do we use cold calling versus emails versus AI generated emails? And I will say the one thing I always say, maybe I'm very old school, but is with cold calling, at least, it's not a robot, right? Typically it can be a robot, but typically it's actually a person. So I think that is, to your point, I think going back to some of those basics, like handwritten notes, we talk a lot at Challenger. I'm actually flying to DC tonight for a client meeting. We're trying to do a lot more in-person meetings because we do feel like that's also a big differentiator because people tend to just try to do everything over Zoom these days. So,
yeah, I couldn't agree any more with that.
Yeah. So, with all of this going on, essentially where do you get some of your ideas for challenging your team? I know it's always hard. You talked about motivating, making sure your team's kind of motivated. They've got the morale going into Q4, being a sports person, what are some areas that, you use or some things you do to motivate your team?
Yeah, definitely. So one thing that we have been doing here for a number of years is a thing called a tone meeting. Tone stands for targets, objectives, new, and execution. So this comes from my sports background, but every Monday we want to set the tone, right? We want to set the tone for the week to make sure we're energized and ready to go. But specifically within that tone meeting, it's how are we doing? What are the key projects we have? But that one section N of new, we actually task our team on a regular basis, and I'd highly encourage you to do this no matter how big or small your team is, to test and explore different aspects of how they're prospecting, share it with the team, drive others to implement it, and as a result, you can build something into your process that wasn't there before. That specific thing of I mentioned earlier about the LinkedIn voice messages and the videos, that happened because literally there was this one person on our team who was like, I've been testing this out. It's working really well. You also try it. Then other people started trying it, had success. And as a result, it's now a critical component within our process, right? But you do have to constantly check in with your team to figure out what's working, what's not, have people test and explore against it. Because at the end of the day, when it comes to prospecting, the different tactics that you're doing today, more than likely will not be effective 6 months from now. The messaging will not be effective 6 months ago. So you have to be in a constant state of innovation. Otherwise, you'll put yourself in a situation where you have this system that you believe works really well, but it's not, only because our prospects have evolved. And for us, it's that tone meeting every single week where we're talking about what's new and we're testing and exploring.
No, I love that. And I think that idea, a safe space to share ideas and what's working. I think sometimes as sales reps, we tend to be like lone wolves and just kind of do our own thing. So I think, forcing, people to collaborate, to give good ideas. I think that's, so important, especially, during this economy is just difficult, right? So I think anyone that can motivate people or give other ideas, I think makes a lot of sense.
100%. I think the second thing on it too is just really baking into your culture where the team wants to do that. If it's driven through them, then it'll just be that much more effective.
Right. They're not being forced to do it.
Exactly.
So so I know we've talked a lot about this topic, and you did bring up obviously the AI piece of this. So, what are some other ways that you're seeing AI? I mean, we've all got the AI emails, and obviously we use AI around conversational intelligence. So what are some areas where you've seen really effective, obviously your own tool, but some other areas of focus for AI?
Yeah. So I think there are a lot of different applications for AI. Yeah. So I think for everyone out there, really think about every process within your team and explore whether or not there's an option for that, right? It could be the simple fact of producing emails. We have a writer within our tool that allows us to quickly generate emails that are at scale, right? It could be the use of a dialer system, which you can produce a lot more calls than you typically do. It could be using AI to find the right contacts to pursue within an account. So if there is a specific function within your sales org or your sales process, there's more than likely some kind of system or technology that leverages AI to allow you to be a lot more efficient. So it really comes down to each organization, really knowing their business and knowing how they generate revenue and find different solutions to help them pick apart better ways to improve it through AI. But for us, we see it more as something that, as we're evolving, you have to have some kind of AI system baked into your process, and it's only going to allow you to be that much more efficient. So we heavily invest in it.
Yeah, no, that completely makes sense. And I think that's I think it's hard, like AI is everywhere, but it's nowhere, like, so I think it's giving people, and I even think about that, like tech enabled solutions, right? Like, I think people always ask me like, what's the bare minimum tech stack you need from like a sales enablement perspective? Because obviously there's so much on the market. There's a lot of noise in the market as well. And so really understanding, kind of to your point, like your sales process and being able to understand like what you truly need, what's really going to change, and how that's going to help is critical.
Exactly.
So when you look at like the tech stack that you use, like what are some of the, obviously your own tool, but like what are some other things that you feel like are kind of like basic, things you need to think about if you're, if you really want to close the year strong, right? What are some like technology improvements or some ways, we talked about kind of the culture, the processes, trust the process, but like what are some other things that you used or resources that you think are really helpful, especially during Q4?
Yeah, definitely. So, I mean, looking at our process, obviously 6 Sense is number one. It drives our overall strategy tactically. I'd encourage everyone out there, if you haven't explored a dialer, I was kind of thinking about it for a long time. I hadn't really done so. They work very well. They account for the fact that a lot of people are not calling right now, so there's an opportunity to take advantage of. So I definitely explore that as well. I think a lot of teams, whether it's using some kind of GPT technology or not, being able to quickly craft highly personalized emails works really well. One thing we've already started exploring over here is we call it an email blitz, where because we have GPT technology within our AI writer, you can actually quickly craft in what would have been, an hour of 5 or 10 emails, now 25 to 30 emails within a short period of time, because you have the information, you have the prompts that have been created, and as a result, you can churn out some great emails. So those are things that we're looking at. But again, I think obviously from a strategy standpoint, look at the accounts and whether or not they're in market, that's what drives everything for us.
Yeah, no, completely. I know I've been used ChatGPT for LinkedIn posts, to your point, to emails. And it's hard because sometimes I feel like, oh my gosh, I'm cheating, but like it is really good. And I do try to edit them, right? Like, so they're not completely like, they sound a little more personalized. So exactly. But it's a great starting point. I think a lot of people were resistant at first because they felt like it wasn't like good to do. But now I think, now I'm always like, is that ChatGPT or did someone actually write that? So.
Yeah, and I think that natural hesitations or resistance will slowly go away once people start realizing the impact of efficiency through using AI. Like it's uncomfortable right now, I think, for some people, but again, once you start winning with it consistently, it'll become the norm.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. So switching gears, this has been awesome. I think you're definitely helping people get motivated for, Q4. And I know our team is really trying to end the year strong. So, I guess just getting to know you a little bit better. One of the questions I love to ask people is if there's anybody, and it doesn't have to be sales and marketing related, it can be, but if there's anyone that you've really been inspired by, like if you could have lunch with anyone, whether living, dead, sales, marketing, runs the gamut, right? You've had an interesting career. So, what would be, who'd be somebody that you'd be interested in?
The person that I would most definitely have lunch with, because I'd say I've heard the term serial alpha is what they're called, but it's Arnold Schwarzenegger. I've
never heard that term. What's a serial alpha?
Yeah, it's a person who, under any circumstance, finds a way to be the best at whatever they're doing, right? And Arnold Schwarzenegger is by far and large one of those people. Mr. Olympian, real estate mogul, governor, movie actor, like whatever he touched, he was phenomenal at. I would just love to learn like how he attacked things. Why did he choose the things he did? And it's such a unique story of someone who came from literally nothing to what he is right now. And that'd be an awesome person to talk to.
No, I love that. I've heard goats, but I've never heard of what's it called? Serial A, right? Is that what you said?
A serial alpha. Yep,
serial
exactly.
alpha. Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
I love that. I never thought about, obviously I'm very familiar with Arnold Schwarzenegger, but I never thought about like how everything he's done, he's been successful. Because we always think of like the greats, like the Michael Jordans, the Tom Brady's of the world, Michigan fan, Tom Brady. But we always think about like, the goats of the world, but we don't think about people who've done like multi, right? Like they've done it across lots of different industries, which is so fascinating to think about.
Exactly. Yeah. So he's definitely an interesting person. I'd love to talk to him and learn how and why he chose the things. And yeah, it'd be awesome to talk to him.
Yeah, that's very cool. So anything else? Obviously, we've talked a lot about AI, but when you think about the future of sales, like what are other things that you think are, coming up in the next, 6 to 18 months that I guess is not AI, which feels like that's all we talk about on the future of it. But what are some other things that you're thinking that are pretty interesting?
Yeah, so I mean, I think AI is definitely on the forefront of what everyone's thinking about right now. The thing that I'm most curious about and anticipating a change in is sales is changing because of AI and like the processes, the workflows, the tech we're all using. I firmly believe that things will look very different. Maybe not a year from now, but 2 years from now in terms of team sizes, in terms of structure, processes, et cetera, because as long as AI continues the promise that it has, like it's only going to take away a lot of the administrative work, a lot of the not redundant work, but a lot of the
Right.
work that's taking a lot of time from reps. And I do believe that it's going to drive the overall quality and expertise of our sales reps. And I have no idea what this is going to look like, right? Imagine a world where SDRs are not producing any kind of automated activity. They're only doing quality calls, quality emails,
Right.
having conversations. That's going to take, in some cases, in some environments, a very different SDR, right? The same thing could be for some sales reps. So I don't know what it's going to look like, and I think there's a lot of promise with AI, but I do firmly believe that things are changing, and maybe not a year from now, but 2 years from now, the way we're selling is just going to be very different because a lot of it will be automated or a lot more easy for us to manage.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I think that, I like that you said that it'll be automated or easier, right? I don't think we're replacing, AI is never going to replace people. I think that you'll always have to have that trusted advisor, that conversation. But I agree with you, like that SDR job especially might look really different. Like we're already seeing it with the automated email systems and, some of the companies that are out there, especially from a top of funnel perspective, generating emails and LinkedIn posts and all of that. But I do think it'll be interesting to see where kind of how far down the funnel AI continues to sort of, once again, I'm not saying like replace jobs, but augment, the staff of some of those, like to your point, like the SDRs.
Yeah, I agree. I think that for those of you out there who are thinking about this, I think for the reps that are elite, who are really good at what they do, they're going to thrive in this new environment because it's only going to highlight their expertise. And I think that's more or less of how we're shifting towards, where maybe there are smaller teams, but you are really, really good at what you do and you are highly specialized. And as a result, you get paid accordingly for it. So We'll see what happens.
Yeah, I mean, that's something we talk a lot about, obviously, with our challenger customers is this idea of like the teach, don't pitch, right? So like, when we think about, we always used to say like, we'd have these big circles and it's like the amount of prep you do before a discovery call versus, a lot of people think, oh, you just jump on the phone, you figure out, you ask them what keeps them up at night and you don't really have to do a bunch of research ahead of time. But obviously, we know at Challenger that it's really that first call that's so critical. And now, I mean, there's no excuse, right? Like you can literally put any company in, any LinkedIn into like some AI tool and get so much information that like, I almost think that the expectation of that first call is just going to continue to, be so critical.
And not to mention that our buyers are going to expect it, right?
Yeah.
So if they start expecting it and you can't produce it, then that's where things get a little bit interesting for those who aren't as strong as sellers as others out there.
Yeah, no, I was just on a call last week. Someone was trying to sell me something and it was literally like they jumped right into the demo and I was like, what are you doing? You're selling your CEO Challenger. And I was like, you haven't done any research. How are you doing this? Like,
yeah, exactly.
So it's like, to your point, like our expectations, right, especially those of us in sales are going to be I'm already super critical. I'm like, you're trying to sell to me, aren't you? I'm like the worst. Like my husband's in nonprofit, so he has like no idea when someone's trying to sell something to him, and I'm like, I always joke with him. I was like, you realize they're totally trying to sell us. He's like, what do you mean?
Exactly.
So I'm like, yeah, that's actually, yeah. So no, I agree. I think the bar will be a lot harder and, there's no excuses, right? For like a rep being unprepared or coming to a meeting, not understanding everything about their prospect. And so totally agree. Well, this has been super helpful. You got me super psyched for even Q4. I know some days it just feels like, oh gosh, are we going to get all these deals closed in our pipeline? And I love the idea of Sixth Sense really helping people understand their pipeline and what's actually real and what's not real, because that is truly like a gift, because it is so hard sometimes to understand. Like, we always joke about salespeople having like happy ears, right? Like they hear something and they get like super excited. And then, I listened to a gong call. I was like, no, they're not going to buy. Right. So it's definitely helpful to have some other third party say, hey, you know what? Actually, like, I don't think it's going to work out this way. So I think that's super helpful, but also helps you figure out, how to prioritize your time when, obviously there's a lot going on. So really appreciate all your insights. So what's the best way for people to connect with you? Obviously you're a wealth of information. So, how can people find you?
Yeah, definitely. So my LinkedIn page, Ernest Owusu. I think it's spelled out just like that on my link. But LinkedIn's great, email's great. I'll respond. So if you actually reach out to me, I will respond back to you. But yeah,
That's fantastic. That's even better. Like I know some people.
yeah.
So that's great. Well, Ernest, thank you so much for your time. This was super fun. I enjoyed it, and great to get to know you. And congrats on all your success. And I love the transition, and just how you've been really able to. I would say I would almost call you wait, shoot, I just messed it up. An alpha. Serial alpha. Serial alpha, because you did well in your sports career as well as in your sales career. So I'm going to call you a serial alpha because you were able to do that. I bet you'll continue to do awesome things. So great meeting you.
Thank you so much. Nice meeting you too.